Hi, I'm Christoph Weider, Nuffield Scholar from 2019. It's 2023. A few things happening in between, but I'm finally getting this Nuffield Scholar report done. Here from beautiful Uvita, Costa Rica. Couldn't think of a more perfect place to have this discussion. And if you're wondering what the background noise is, that is actually a set of toucans over there calling each other. So I think it was 2018. My family and I were on a family vacation in Indonesia, and I saw a advertisement come through for Nuffield Canada. I did a little research. I had known a few other people that had done Nuffield scholarships in the past, and I thought that would be kind of a cool thing to do. Maybe see the world a little bit more. I've traveled lots already, but agriculture and finding a different perspective is always good for the mind. So I applied and was accepted, and so it began. Yeah, so for me, nature has always been a passion uh, ever since I was a little kid, and it continues to be such. And over the years in agriculture, I've been farming 25 years. I've just seen a whole pile of changes going on in landscapes and loss of habitat and biodiversity. And a lot of the problems stem from the fact that agriculture producers are producers for food, but we don't really get paid for anything remotely related to the ecological goods and services that our land and the habitat that's on that land provides. And so I thought of an idea that would be cool, would be to do a Nuffield scholarship research project on looking at programs and policy geared towards supporting ecological goods and services provided by farmers and ranchers, specific in Canada. I had the idea in the back of my head. I'd done a lot of reading, and then I did a pile of traveling. Went to the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. I traveled through Switzerland, where there's lots of programs and policy geared towards green agricultural programs. I went to Germany, the Netherlands. I was in the UK, in Ireland. I had been to the States. I had read a lot of the policies and programs in Canada that were coming out. And so I did my travels, and then, I kind of seen things out there that thought would work, but, I just kind of kept an open mind. And I guess the biggest revelation for me was when took part of one of the Nuffield tours. I didn't go on the full 7 week or 6 week travel around the world, but I happened to be able to get involved in a tour to Japan, and went to the tour in Japan, and that really opened my mind from a standpoint of how producers sell a story with the farm products that they produce, be it the Wagyu beef or the specialized mangoes or other fruits that they were growing. I just thought it was very interesting how people were willing to pay a very, to some extent, exorbitant prices for products for the sake of the story and everything that's put behind them. And I guess the biggest revelation to me, I grew up on a dairy farm southeast of Edmonton in central Alberta, and then moved to the Peace Country in 2003, where my wife and I ranch, Erica and the kids, we started north of Grand Prairie, and now we live at Hudson's Hope, which is west of Fort St. John, literally on the edge of agriculture, where agriculture ends and the wilderness begins. And to me, it's always logical. Wildlife and biodiversity surrounds me everywhere. And it wasn't until I was in Japan and we were at some organic farm looking at, I can't remember which crop it was, but then it really hit me how I'm at this organic farm and things are green around me, Yet, like this fly that's buzzing in my face, there was no insects buzzing around. This was in June, and I didn't hear any birds. I didn't see anything, and ironically, I seem to be the only scholar that picked up on it, because obviously a lot of people maybe live in nature deficit areas, and so it didn't occur to them. And so that really hit home and resonated to me when I came back. What a wonderful thing that we have on our own ranch, and the biodiversity and things that we do have. It was kind of a TSN turning point where I came home. I still didn't quite know how things would happen after that. And then obviously I did a bunch of traveling in that fall of, and I was in the UK. Fall of what? The fall, I'm trying to remember all the dates now. It's been so long. I guess it would have been in the fall of 19, or sorry, in the summer of 19 was when we went to Japan. And then that winter, I did a bunch more traveling, and it would have been in February when I was in the UK and Ireland, and just when COVID was starting to happen. So I was actually looking pretty forward, because in April we were supposed to go to the Triennial, and then it got canceled pretty much a few days before I was supposed to hit the road. And so then the world basically kind of changed at that point. Traveling was banned, or at least wasn't banned, but I mean, certainly, complicated, to put it the right word, and stuff like that. And ironically, at the same time, our ranch, we had done a bunch of changes too. We raised grass-finished beef and bison, but we were really growing our bison business. And basically, in the fall of 2020, we had transitioned from selling yearling bison to selling grass-finished and fattened 2.5-year-old bison. And that fall came around, and we were in a situation where we had to figure out what the heck to do with these animals, and then realized the market had collapsed because all the restaurants were closed, and consequently we weren't going to make a lot of money, or if not lose money, on these bison. And it was kind of a revelation at the same time, because of all the lockdowns and restrictions going on in bigger cities, we were getting so many calls from hunters in the lower mainland of British Columbia, Vancouver, the Okanagan, and those places, that were asking and requesting to see if they could come and spend some time on our ranch to hunt and get away from the cities and stuff. And it was kind of at that point where there was a revelation I had that, these guys are willing to come to my ranch, or our ranch, to come and hunt, and then they were asking, well, could they buy a bison? So I said, well, for sure. And then it thought to me, why don't I basically just make sure that every hunter that comes has to buy a bison in order to have the privilege of hunting on our land? And what happened out of that was basically all of a sudden, and I guess it was part of the travels that I had done in Nuffield, especially in the UK and Ireland, as well as in the Netherlands, where a lot of agritourism exists. That was a resource that we had on our ranch that we never really looked at as a financial opportunity to add value to the ranch and add income to the ranch. And so we rented out one of our cabins, and people would come for 4 or 5 days of hunting, and then they would harvest one of their own bison at the same time. We'd skin it and gut it and quarter it and set it up so they could go home. And then did that a few times, and all of a sudden we were getting calls from people that had talked to other people that had been to our place and were asking for maybe a quarter bison or an eighth of bison. And of course, when we have so many bison that are ready to go and no market for it, we said, for sure, let's go for it. And so all of a sudden, this opportunity presented itself, and then I realized, people are looking for good meat. They like the fact that our ranch is doing a great job on looking after habitat, water resources, wildlife habitat, grazing management, looking after the animals and all those things. And there's people willing to actually buy our product. I guess the paradigm shift I had to have was the fact, because of where we live, we're on average at least 8 hours away from where most of our customers are coming from. And so this idea dawned on me that, maybe there is even more opportunity for selling the meat direct and tie it to a story of where the meat comes from, how we look after the land, how we look after the animals and everything else. Because I'd seen that in Japan, that people were willing to spend exorbitant amounts of money for food with a story and quality behind it. And so all of a sudden we started direct marketing meat, and it took off like crazy. And so Christmas, right before Christmas of 2020, we hit the road with the first load of meat from customers that we had throughout the province that we hadn't figured out how to get their meat to them, so we decided to do our own delivery run and set off with a Land Cruiser delivery run. It went fantastic, and I looked at the wallet after what came in and said, man, this is pretty good. And then we did it again in January and February, and by the time we got to the end of February, next thing you know, we had a delivery van that we had organized, so we have refrigeration while we're going and delivering meat. We quickly realized that because of what we were doing, the story was spreading quickly, but we also needed to come up with a system of being able to efficiently harvest these animals, process these animals, everything else, because the closest meat processors were 2.5 hours away one way, and driving in the winter and having a little extra time, it would become a one-day event, and usually we could take, the most was 3 or 4 animals. So basically, we decided in the spring, by February 2021, that we would build our own abattoir on the ranch so that we could harvest the animals on the ranch, age the meat on the ranch, cut and process the meat on the ranch, and basically set up an online order system. And we came up with a brand called Bison Guy. And so Bison Guy has quickly evolved in 2 years from a Land Cruiser, 2 deliveries in an Escalade, to a delivery van, to building a packing plant, to a delivery system where people order online, and we now do regularly scheduled deliveries throughout British Columbia, going direct to consumer with our product. We have eliminated the middleman, all the middlemen in between, captured the full retail value of the meat on the other side, improved the margins for ourselves, figured out efficiencies to minimize transportation in the light of increased fuel costs and everything else, so that we lower our cost of production, and at the same time also, you hear that in the background, those are howler monkeys. So we've basically been able to improve our efficiencies, create a really differentiated product, because we're the only ones in British Columbia, a population of 5.5 million consumers, that we're the only ones doing grass-finished bison, and on top of that have ample availability to access the animals that we need for this plant. And now, basically 10 days ago, we opened up our packing plant with establishment number 77. We opened a 13,000 square foot slaughter facility. We are now processing in that plant and tweaking things so that by the fall of 2023, we are able to even grow that further and faster. I started out with an idea of looking at program and policy geared towards ecological goods and services. Basically, in a nutshell, government programs or somehow some sort of mechanism to pay a producer for doing that. Eric and I had done conservation easements on a ranch previous to the one that we live at now. At the time, seemed like a great idea, put a conservation easement on the land. It didn't affect how we operated the land, how we grazed the land, everything else. It allowed us to capture some value for the land that we used to pay down debt when we were getting started. But in actuality, is a very poor mechanism, because when we actually were selling that ranch, it was looked at and perceived as a negative to the land because it restricted what could and couldn't happen. And because there is no annual payment system coming in with that program, we actually, through Ducks Unlimited, even though we got the money, our land was valued lower because we were in an area where it wasn't a high population, and so obviously the demand structure made it such that the farmers in the area that were the ones buying the land didn't see a value to it. At the same token, having been through countries in Europe which are heavily subsidized with a lot of programs tied to green agriculture, the farmer becomes dependent upon these checks. And at the same time, as we can see what's been going on in the Netherlands with restricting of nitrogen, it's simple that the government now has control over you by basically simply saying, you know what, if you don't follow the new policies, we're just going to take the money away from you. And so COVID has been a great example of government overreach and government restrictions and government power grabs. And what's in actuality, as much as I was excited about looking at programs and policy geared towards ecological goods and services, I'm way further ahead and much better off now because we control our own destiny. We have a great product. We tell it the story of what we are about and what the meat represents. And the meat represents healthy food, sustainable production system, regenerative agriculture, preservation and enhancement of biodiversity, fair trade to the farmers and the people involved in the value chain, bringing that meat out, and a great proposition for the consumer at the end. And I think that in itself, because we control it and how it works, is a much better proposition than trying to organize a bunch of bureaucrats to come up with a payment scheme which will need a whole pile of auditing and checking to make sure it works, and at the end of the day can change so quickly. And so even though I started down that path, the path basically brought me along into a different system, and it's hard to believe in such a short period of time how we have been able to create a program for ourselves for ecological goods and services through the products that we produce. Again, now we sell the meat direct. We also have hunters that are basically paying for the privilege of being on our ranch through our accommodations, but then also supporting the ranch through the products that we're producing, which have incorporated a cost for the ecological goods and services that we do. I think it depends on what type of personality you are and stuff. I mean, obviously, our example of being able to direct market meat when you are 12 hours away from Vancouver, we've broken that paradigm and we are still able to do it. It all comes down onto the producer's perspective and, I guess, goals that what they want to be doing for themselves. The reality is, if you are going to be a commodity player, you're going to be shaped by the market that decides what you will be paid, and you will work on the costs or try to shave the costs or try to be as efficient as possible to lower your cost of production. In our situation, we are obviously focused on cost of production, but we are working to make sure we're also at the top end of the marketing to create a margin for the ranch. Is it a formula for everybody? I don't know. But at the end of this journey that I've gone through with Nuffield, really it's about my family and those that care about what they want to do. I can't change the world, but I can change what's in front of me. And so that's what we've really focused on. You know, it was great seeing a lot of the scholars on the tours that I went and seeing what they have for resources and what they're doing and the creativity with what they have in front of us. And I mean, some of the tours that I had in the UK were fantastic, because it, not everything applied from there, but it was examples of things they could do to add more value to what your ranch has. I mean, the one place I went to had a natural, quote unquote, cemetery where people could book themselves to be buried without all the things that go into the modern day funeral business. And so that was a way he was selling plots for cemeteries on his ranch, which I thought was pretty unique, and grow a bunch of trees and got paid for looking after the trees. So I don't know, there's all sorts of ideas of how to be creative and how to do things. I think that's what really opened my eyes. And lots of times, you have to go further than your backyard sometimes to see some of these ideas, and maybe sometimes these things are right underneath your nose and you don't see them until you're much further away. Well, we've got a brand going now. We've got our own packing plant growing now. Now we're basically learning a lot more about social media and communication and how to get more of this message across so that we can continue to grow our customer base for this. The other part of the goal is incorporating the next generation into how to operate this business. And I think by incorporating the next generation, there will be other ideas that come into it. The social media aspects and everything else like that, maybe somebody else is better at it than I am. But I think that's the open mind. And being in the background of being in Costa Rica right now, it's a good way to see the place from a distance, and again get other ideas of things you can do and everything else, and taking some more time to reflect on how to get better at it. It's all about nature. I mean, that's why we're here. I mean, I look out the backyard and there's thousands of species roaming around out there, from the smallest of insects and butterflies and birds to plants and all the things we don't see that's going on underneath the soil and everything else like that. So, no, I mean, nature, as Eric always says, is our passion. And so we're going to keep on going. And I'd like to thank Nuffield Canada and everybody for being patient with my report. I hope this story has enlightened a few people of what we do and what I found, and why maybe it's taken a little bit longer to get this report done than I would have liked. So thank you very much to all the sponsors. And with that, and no further ado, thanks for your time to listen to my report.
So I'm Erika Wieder, and
I'm Christoph Wieder.
Yeah, we ranch together here with our kids as well. So it's a family operation. So what we do is we raise our animals on a sustainable basis. So nature is our passion, always was and always will be. We had beef for a long time. When I met Christoph back in '99, he had just beef. And then that's when we started with bison, because we had neighbors that were bison producers. We started with just shy of 70, and now we have over, I don't even know, 1,000 something. So a lot more now.
And one of the goals in my life, or in our lives, was to have a ranch that is a functioning ecosystem. Our animals graze on this land. The nutrients produced from that animal go back into the soil. We have big watersheds. We provide biodiversity for wildlife habitat. It's just a total different production system. We have healthy soils. Healthy soils means you have healthy minerals in your meat.
Be able to have this full circle, to have them born on the ranch, to raise them right here, to graze them, feed them in the winter with the hay in the fields, and then be able to butcher them right here. That's for us, it's perfect.
just makes so much more sense. All the waste material coming out of that packing plant is going to be composted and will be put on our land and be part of the fertility for the land and everything else. It's going to make for the best meat quality possible, both on the bison and beef, and so much more sustainable. Ordinary British Columbians that want to have the best quality meat for their family, they buy direct from the farm. They know that their dollars go straight into a farm and not middlemen all in between. They get the best prices for it. At the same time, we make a sustainable return for our family as well as the staff that are on this ranch. We were the national recipients for the Canadian Cattlemen's Environmental Stewardship Award in 2013. And Eric and I were also the Outstanding Farmers of Canada a few years back now.
It's been a while.
I guess that would be 2006. So we're pretty proud of some of the things we've done in our past, and like to think that those things have kind of set the template for how we look at life and take on things. We're beyond organic, and if the consumer wants healthy meat that's raised sustainably and feels good at what's going on and not have to have a guilty conscience, we're their person for them and stuff. And I kind of invite you to be part of something good, because that's what really our ranch is about.